Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
Welcome to the Alldus podcast. As part of our AI in Action series, you're speaking to Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. Today's guest is Timo Möller. Timo is the co-founder of Deepset. Timo, great to have you on the show today.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me on the show. Really looking forward to it.
Tell us a little bit about your background before we jump into Deepset.
So I've been studying data science and computational neuroscience. And as a person, I'm just really very interested in intelligent machines and especially making intelligent machines and algorithms work for specific applications. And that's why I'm also one of the co-founders of Deepset, an NLP startup we started in 2018.
So what does Deepset do? Tell us what the problems it solves.
As I mentioned, we are a natural language processing startup that is focused on information extraction and neural search. So neural search is deep learning based search, and we're using latest methods. We have been bootstrapped until now through like integrations of our open source software, but we also found just this year, we found really good investors that support our vision very strongly and are also extremely knowledgeable in the open source space in combination with machine learning.
Timo, for people that don't know much about natural language processing, could you give them a little bit of a crash course up until now? And let's dive straight into some of the more new things that are happening in that field. And then we can talk a little bit about OSS neurosearch.
So natural language processing basically deals with all automated text processing. Like very prominent examples, I would say, are translation. This has now shifted from more traditional methods to deep learning based methods. Then another use case would be generative text, this OpenAI GPT-3 model that people might have heard about. This is very prominent and produces very meaningful and coherent text, and also sometimes very fascinating creative text, so to say. But also one application is, of course, the search and information retrieval in all aspects of it. When you remember, for example, Google, the search results, when you looked at them a couple of years ago, it was a ranked list of pages. And nowadays it's turning more and more into really extracting the answer of it. And all this technology is also part of natural language processing that they're using. And a lot of this technology is open source and then can be used by startups to combine it in meaningful ways and enhance it to actually create more powerful solutions for everybody else.
So tell us about Haystacks.
So as a company, we are open source first. And that means that we believe that all NLP frameworks will also be open source and all AI applications will be open source. And Haystack is an open source framework for neural search and information extraction. So what you can do there, when you think about, for example, frameworks like TensorFlow or PyTorch, like these massive monoliths backed by Google and Facebook, you really have to do a lot of coding to get AI to work. And with this advent of newer open source frameworks, higher level open source frameworks, like, for example, Spacey, Rasa, Hugging Face Transformers, and also Haystack, you can take models, stick them into like meaningful pipelines that transform your text data, be it like PDF documents or Excels, and then search through it or summarize it or rank it in a meaningful way.
For people listening in, Timo, could you give us an idea of some of the case studies and some meaningful impact that can be utilized from this?
Mostly companies that are turning to us, they're using it for either live search on very private data that they cannot put online, or to extract information. And for example, we have the framework Haystack in production at Infineon to really search through financial data that is coming in, a lot of financial data that is coming in, and also at a German federal agency. They have really large reports, huge reports, very detailed reports with very specific language, and they need to extract the right information out of these reports to automate certain compliance processes. And this is one part of it, but also what we see is a lot of people from data science departments, Netflix, Airbus. We have also like a large telephone company from the States who are very interested in just the open source solution of Haystack to use it in their tools to automate search and to have like more intelligent replacements than, for example, Elasticsearch.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
So, when you take a search, because I'm an English speaker, I'm very, very biased and I'm always doing my searches in English. But when you think about some of the products that are being rolled out against 22, 23 different languages, and you're trying to get the context right, and it has to be natural, and so many of these languages don't just translate like for, there's so many different cultural nuances as well that need to be taken into consideration. Can you talk me through some of the challenges for languages other than English?
That's a really good question, and also something we have been working, and of course others in the field, hard to get right. So one thing is that you create natural language processing applications for completely different languages like German, French, Chinese. And what you can do there is you can either train large language models specifically tailored for this language. But what also works really well is to train one language model on multiple languages. There are variants from Google as well as from Facebook. And with these multilingual models, you can then do tasks in different areas. For example, you can do document classification in English, but also then in the other languages that the model, so to say, speaks and understands. You can do document classification then in Spanish and German as well. And the really interesting thing about it is if you tailor your model to these tasks like document classification or question answering, what you need is you still need labeled data. So you need input and label mappings. And if you have these labels in English, it still transfers to the other languages. So an answering model that has been trained on English data, which is very abundant, also works out of the box for German questions and German text.
It's such an interesting field because the recent advances in NLP are just turning everything on its head, and the customer experience is just being improved so much better, and the context is allowing for different services to be given. Where do you see it further progressing in the next 18 months or maybe even 5 years?
So I think the trend is still continuing that with more compute, you can also achieve more and also especially automatize more. We see a lot of increase in transfer learning for NLP, so that you have standard methods trained on standard data sets and you transform them to your specific use case. And this makes large-scale industry adoption very quick. On a technological side, especially for search, I'm thinking a lot about these generative GPT-3-like models and if there could be alternatives. And I'm really excited about a method that overcomes the limitations of these large generative models.
Yeah, and it ties me into that GPT, the limitations of that, and how do you overcome those limitations?
So limitations are, for example, if you train this GPT-3 model on text that is then, let's say, from 2018. You train it on hundreds of gigabytes of this text with millions and billions of parameters. And then you ask it a question about how far COVID vaccine is in Israel. So like a very recent information. And it doesn't have chance to really answer these recent questions. That is a huge problem. And the other problem, of course, with GPT-3 is that the answer comes from within the network in such a complicated way that you cannot really explain why it answers in this way. And to overcome this is, of course, it's also using a generative model, but it's not that the data is stored within the model, but that it has external access to memory. And there has been a lot of progression lately, especially from Facebook AI research. They have developed a method called retrieval augmented generation. And what they're doing there, they're retrieving the relevant text information from a large database, directly accessible to the neural network. They stick this information into the neural network and then combine this text to produce the answer. And in this way, you can answer questions on domain data. You have verifiable answers because you can then more easily point to the source of the information. And yeah, we believe this is one of the key technologies, will become one of the key technologies in the future.
I really like that you can point to the source. I think that's really, really helpful for people.
Yeah, to understand and to also trust an AI system. Yes, totally.
So tell us a little bit more what's happening with Deepset and what's the future hoping to bring.
Of course, we are building a lot around our open source framework. We have a super active community also from external people that help us a lot because they see also the great value and also the beauty how we designed the framework. And this is really cool. And we want to increase a lot of efforts into building this like very open system that a lot of people can use. And at the same time, we also want to combine this open source model with a model that is actually profitable. We don't want to change our license midway because we see that a lot of our efforts diverging from us, but we want to combine this very open source framework and open source license, Apache version 2 license, with a model that is actually a complement to this open source and that actually people see a lot of value in this complement besides Haystack, and they want to buy this then. Yeah. And maybe as a distinction, how we generally approach it, I think there's also a lot of really nice thoughts. One of our idol companies is Databricks and how they're doing it. It's really great to see. So we believe that everything that a developer should do and can do, this should go into the open source framework, and everything on an organizational side that an organization must fulfill to use the open source tool, this should go to our paid complement to our paid product.
You've been listening to the Alldus podcast as part of our AI in Action series. I've been speaking to Timo Möller, co-founder of Deepset. Timo, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for these very interesting questions. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.